And most recently, our Secretary of Defense, who likes to cosplay by giving himself the fake title, Secretary of War, posted an image on Twitter of Franklin the Turtle firing missiles at narco-terrorists. Pete Hegseth's social media account for your Christmas wish list, Franklin targets narco-terrorists. This is the Secretary of Defense, folks, of the greatest nation on earth. And to him, this thing's just a big joke. Think about that. America's Secretary of Defense has enough time on his hands that he and his minions get to come up with cartoon memes to make light of the fact that the United States is killing people in international waters. He's spending his time and energy thinking about cartoons rather than keeping us safe. And I just have to ask this. I was intrigued at this particular detail. There's a great biblical phrase that says, from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. So something that you're feeling inside tends to come outside of your mouth, even if it's somewhat unintentional. Why Franklin? I mean, if you're going to do a cartoon, like Franklin is a Canadian cartoon. Why not Scooby-Doo or Peanuts or, Snoopy? I mean, why Franklin? Of all the cartoon figures that Pete Hegseth could spend time imagining into an AI-generated cartoon making fun of killing why Franklin? Well, I don't know the answer to that. Secretary Hegseth does, but I have an intuition. Check and see the name of the Special Forces commander who Secretary Hegseth is now trying to blame for the second strike killing struggling civilians in international waters. This is no way to wage war. This is no way to wage war. Orders of dubious legality offered by civilian leaders of questionable judgment are leading to dozens of anonymous deaths, division within the U.S. military, and tension with our allies. And the administration's actions are risking the careers of officers and troops, many having served for decades with great distinction, who face the life and death question of whether to obey a superior or follow the law, follow the clear law. All this is occurring with an administration hell-bent on hiding from Congress and the American public the actual facts, strategy, and legal justification for its actions. America is not supposed to be at war based on a presidential say-so. Abraham Lincoln said it well when he was a member of Congress in 1848. The reason why the Constitution has given the war-making power to Congress was because kings have always been involving and impoverishing their people in wars. This, our Constitutional Convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions. And they resolve to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. No one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. It is past time for Congress to reclaim its role in the decision on whether to initiate war. The framers in 1787 wouldn't allow George Washington to make these decisions on his own. We shouldn't allow our current president, a man perfectly comfortable pardoning a convicted criminal who boasted about shoving drugs up the gringos' noses, to make such a decision on his own. It's time for Congress to reassert the role that was handed to us in a sacred way in the Constitution in 1787 and exercise oversight over this mushrooming military operation in the Americas. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsup.
What Tim Kaine did in this speech wasn't routine oversight. It was a moment of someone in government finally saying out loud what far too many have been whispering behind closed doors. The United States is drifting into a model of military decision-making that looks less like a constitutional republic and more like a presidency playing commander-in-chief as performance art. Kaine forces us to confront a truth that should be deeply unsettling. When the Secretary of Defense treats warfare like a graphic novel and pushes out AI cartoons of a turtle firing missiles, it tells us something vital about the internal culture of this administration. It isn't just unserious. It signals a retreat from accountability, a willingness to reduce lethal force to a punchline. You do not create memes about killing narco-terrorists unless you've already detached yourself from the actual human consequences of those decisions. And Kaine is sharp enough to pull back the curtain. He recognizes that the Franklin cartoon may not be random at all, but an attempt to deflect blame toward a special forces commander with the same name now being positioned as a scapegoat for a disastrous second strike that killed unarmed civilians. This is where the humor turns sinister. When political leaders use entertainment to soften public reaction or distract from misconduct, it's no longer just tone-deaf, it becomes a tactic of power. Kaine then brings in a historical understanding that too often gets lost. War powers were not handed to Congress as a suggestion. The framers made that decision intentionally because they had witnessed firsthand how kings dragged nations into conflict for personal gain, ego, or political positioning. Kaine's reminder of Lincoln's words is not just rhetorical, it's a warning that the very pattern the founders feared is repeating itself. When the president initiates strikes without transparency, without congressional approval, and without legal justification, we enter constitutional territory that the framers explicitly sought to prevent. And this is where the pardon becomes the most damning piece of the entire puzzle. The administration claims it is escalating military force in the Caribbean to combat drug trafficking, yet the very same president pardoned a trafficker who openly boasted about pushing drugs directly into the American market. The contradiction is staggering. You cannot justify lethal operations abroad while rewarding those who profit off the very crimes you claim to be fighting. Kaine exposes this hypocrisy not as a political gotcha, but as evidence of a government divorced from coherent policy and driven instead by loyalty politics. His concern extends beyond hypocrisy. It is about the impossible position this administration is placing on the people who actually serve. Soldiers, pilots, intelligence officers, and commanders are being pushed into situations where they must choose between violating the law or disobeying the president. That is not a theoretical danger. It is the exact kind of civil-military crisis that erodes the legitimacy of institutions from the inside out. Kaine's speech is ultimately a demand that Congress reawaken to its constitutional duty. For too long, Congress has relinquished its war-making authority out of political convenience. But when you allow a single individual to wage undeclared, unexamined, unapproved war, the cost is not just legal, it's human. Innocent civilians die in anonymous strikes, allies lose trust, officers are scapegoated, the truth gets buried, and the public is numbed through theatrics and memes. This is the heart of Kaine's message. War is not content, national defense is not entertainment, and the Constitution is not optional. When leaders treat it that way, the country becomes less safe, not more. If you appreciate breaking down these moments with depth, clarity, and accountability that many outlets avoid, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share it. It matters that these conversations remain grounded, informed, and connected to the real stakes behind the political theater.